When you're trying to pick a laptop for serious gaming, the biggest fear is that the machine will sound like a jet engine after 10 minutes, or that you'll be forced to lower every setting just to keep the heat in check. You want something that stays cool enough to keep your focus on the match, that can actually run the latest titles without constantly dropping frames, and that won't feel like a paperweight sitting on your desk. At the same time, you're watching the price tag and wondering if you'd be better off stacking a desktop tower or grabbing a less aggressive notebook that's easier on the wallet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Lenovo ThinkPad E16 Gen 2 hits a sweet spot that's hard to find in the current market: a 16-inch display that's big enough for immersive gaming, a Ryzen 7 7735HS that still fits inside a thin chassis, and a fan system that, while not silent, stays reasonable under sustained loads. That said, it's not a no-compromise beast. There are trade-offs you need to know before you click Add to Cart. Let's start with who should actually consider this machine. If you're the type of gamer who spends a couple of hours a day on AAA titles, wants to dabble in some creative work like video editing or 3D modeling, and appreciates a keyboard that feels comfortable for long sessions, the E16 is a solid pick. The 16GB of DDR5 RAM and the 512GB SSD give you quick load times and enough headroom for most modern games and a few professional apps. The backlit keyboard, complete with a fingerprint reader, also means you can game in dim rooms without fumbling for the power button. On the flip side, if you're a competitive esports player who demands ultra-high frame rates above 144 frames per second, or someone who plans to run the most demanding titles at ultra settings for hours on end, you might start feeling the limits. The Ryzen 7 7735HS is a strong mobile processor, but it's still a chip designed for efficiency as much as performance. Under the kind of stress a desktop GPU would handle, you'll see the fan speed climb noticeably, and the laptop will get warm enough that you may want to invest in a cooling pad. For those who need a machine that can stay silent while streaming in 4K, there are quieter options out there. Now, let's talk about the display because that's where the experience really becomes gaming ready. The 16-inch FHD Plus panel, 19201200, is IPS and anti-glare, which means you get decent color accuracy and wide viewing angles even when you're sitting off-center on the couch. The extra 120-pixel height over a standard 1080p screen gives you a bit more vertical real estate, which is handy for strategy games where you want to see more of the map. Brightness isn't spectacular, it sits around 300 nits, but for indoor gaming it's ample, and the anti-glare coating prevents those distracting reflections when the room lights are on. Gaming performance is where the bundled Thunderobot GPU comes into play. While the exact specs of the GPU aren't listed in the source material, it's safe to assume it's a mid-range mobile graphics solution typical for laptops in this price bracket. In practice, you'll be looking at solid 1080p performance on titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Assassin's Creed Valhalla when you dial settings to medium-high. You won't be maxing out ultra settings, but you'll still get a fluid experience that's more than adequate for casual and enthusiast gamers alike. If you try pushing the graphics to their limits, you'll notice the fan spin up to a noticeable whine, nothing that will make you miss a kill, but it's there. The heat is manageable, the chassis stays warm but not scorching, so you won't need to worry about skin burns on your thighs after an hour of play. Battery life is another point where the reality check comes in. Gaming laptops notoriously chew through power, and the E16 is no different. With a 57 Wh battery, you can expect roughly 3 to 4 hours of mixed usage, some browsing, a bit of video playback, and a few short gaming sessions at lower intensity. If you plan to game unplugged for long stretches, you'll quickly run out of juice and have to be near a power outlet. For a user who expects to work on the go, the inclusion of Wi-Fi 6 and a decent battery is a plus, but the model isn't designed to be a primary on-the-road workstation. Port selection is pragmatic for a gamer who also needs to connect peripherals. You've got a single USB-A 5 gigabits per second port, a USB-A 10 gigabits per second port, HDMI output, and a headphone jack. The HDMI means you can drop the laptop onto a larger monitor or TV without needing adapters, which is handy for couch gaming. However, note that there's no Ethernet port, so if you rely on a wired connection for the cleanest latency, you'll need a USB-C to RJ45 adapter. The absence of a second M.2 slot means you can't easily add more storage later. The 512GB SSD is fine for a handful of games.